Nothing in this podcast or on our website should be construed as medical advice. Consult your healthcare provider for your individual nutritional and medical needs. The information presented is based on our research and is strictly that of the author and not necessarily those of any professional group or other individual.
Hi, I'm Sue Becker from Bread Beckers. Welcome to Sue's Healthy Minutes. I'm so excited you've joined me today, and I hope this episode encourages you and allows you to find the answers you have been praying for the health of you and your family. Today on Sue's Healthy Minutes, it is my great pleasure to speak with Dr. Ben Edwards from Veritas Wellness and Veritas Medical. We've met several times over the years, and I've had the privilege of being on his radio program a few years ago, which began our great relationship. I have visited his beautiful clinic in Lubbock, Texas, to share about Real Bread twice now, where I was always very warmly welcomed. He graciously took time from his day to interview me on either his radio show or his podcast, and he always asked me to share my story and the truths I've learned over the past 32 years about whole grains and fresh milled flour. I've shared those interviews with you all on Sue's Healthy Minutes. But on my recent visit to the clinic just a few weeks ago, I thought how wonderful it would be to hear Dr. Edwards' story and how he transitioned from conventional medicine to a more functional medical approach. And of course, we'll get to how he discovered Real Bread. So I'm very excited, maybe even a little nervous, because I feel like the student interviewing the master. You are such a wealth of knowledge. So welcome, Dr. Edwards. It's such a pleasure to have you on Sue's Healthy Minutes. I'm not sure why I never thought of it before. I think I always thought you would be too busy to come on my little podcast. But when I realized what a humble and very approachable doctor and man you are, I knew I had to reach out. So thank you. And you've got quite a story to tell. So why don't you begin by sharing about yourself and what was that caused you to want to practice medicine in a different way?
Okay. Well, thank you, Sue. That was a very gracious introduction, and I appreciate you having me on your show, and sure appreciates all the time you've come to my show and come to Lubbock and given live presentations. You're the master on the bread, and you're the wealth of information. And I love your little whiteboard presentation of the poop story, because it reminds me of my whiteboard presentation of, I don't call it the poop story, but anyways, kindred spirits. I think the Holy Spirit's been leading us on our journeys differently. So my journey, I grew up in Central Texas, little town there where both my granddads were the doctors for that town. And they'd been the doctors in that town for years and years, actually decades. So they knew the whole town. They delivered most of those people in town. They took care of it from cradle to grave. They did surgeries. They amputated limbs if they needed to. They set broken bones. They did it all. My mom's dad even had a little hospital that he made in Belton, Texas, and with his name was on the hospital, but it was just a little building with a few rooms, kind of like a house for folks to sleep in overnight if they needed to. This is back in the 50s. And he hired a few ladies to be in the kitchen to cook meals for the patients, and it was the hospital in town. Oh, wow. But anyways, so I grew up watching these guys just impact the community so positively and really helping people. And so I wanted to do that. I wanted to help people. That was the motivation. So I went to Baylor undergrad. Actually changed my major about 4 or 5 times because I was trying to run away from the calling of medicine because I thought it'd be too hard. I wasn't smart enough. It'd be too many years in school and too much debt accumulation. But anyways, overcame that finally and just decided to go and got accepted. Went to UT Houston Medical School. Graduated from there in 2002. And UT Houston is a great medical school. It's right across the street from Baylor College of Medicine. So 2 medical schools across the street from each other. There's a nursing school, a pharmacy school, a dental school, and a bunch of hospitals all in this multi-acre complex called the Texas Medical Center down in Houston. So it's one of the world-renowned medical centers to learn conventional medicine. MD Anderson, one of the top cancer hospitals where I did most of my rotations in medical school. So I came out of there, graduated with my MD and my white coat, and I thought I just learned all there was to learn to help people. And then I went to family practice residency training in Waco, Texas, and specifically went there because they train doctors how to do it all like a small town country doctor or for international mission trip kind of doctors. So you can deliver babies and C-sections and set broken bones and do minor surgery and stuff. So I was chief resident in Waco. So, I mean, I'm coming out there thinking, man, I've learned what I need to do to get out in the world and go help people.
Yeah, see, you are the master.
No, but that's the mindset doctors have. Yeah. Is we go to these great institutions in America for medical school. I mean, supposedly I'm not trying to toot my own horn, but if you're the sort of top of your class, well, you go to law school or med school. That's kind of just our culture we live in. And so if you make it to med school and you're chief resident, you're kind of the top. You should know it all. So I kind of thought I did. And so the arrogance and the pride kind of just gets built in automatically because of our culture and the education system. But anyways, my wife and I, Jamie, we got married halfway through med school. She's from a little tiny town up in Colorado, from a ranching family. And we got married and then in Waco had our first baby. And so we're living our dream. We pray and ask the Lord, where are we supposed to start our practice? And we looked at 30 different small towns across Texas and ended up in Post, Texas, way out in West Texas towards almost to New Mexico. It's south of Lubbock. And there wasn't a doctor in the whole county. And they had a little clinic there, county clinic, so the taxpayers funded it. It was losing $5 to $10,000 a month because they had one nurse practitioner a couple days a week, kind of part-time, and just it wasn't a real viable clinic financially. So they challenged me to get them financially sound. And so we went there and got after it and had a great staff, great nurse, great office manager. The community got behind us, and we were super successful from a financial standpoint, which means volume. We saw 40 patients a day, 7-minute office visits, did lots of procedures. I was the medical director for the nursing home in town, the county jail, the juvenile detention center jail, the Friday night football game team doctor for the high school, house calls on the weekend. So I'm just living my dream, being that small town country doctor for 7 years.
Wow.
And the clinic turned it around financially to the tune of $1 million in the healthcare district's bank account, because that was tax dollars coming in that we weren't needing because we were self-sufficient, making money on our own. And they built a brand new clinic. So that was awesome. Brand new clinic, money in the bank. Washington Post newspaper from D.C. came and followed us around for a week and put us on the front page and did a big cover story on how you can be successful in a county clinic with Medicare and Medicaid as your payer. But anyways, I'm not tooting my own horn. I'm just saying that's the picture of like my dream.
Yeah.
I'm doing it. So
you're living it.
Yeah. And I want to tell you, both my granddads, they were MDs, medical doctors, and 2 uncles are medical doctors. My great-great-granddad, medical doctor. So I wasn't grown up the word chiropractor, herbalist or naturopath or homeopathic or anything holistic or natural or alternative wasn't even in my radar, wasn't in my language, my vocabulary, my culture. I didn't know anything about it. And in fact, if a patient in Post in Garza County would bring me like a little clipping from a natural health newsletter or something that they got about some herb that could treat something, I mean, I would be polite about it because I try to love people, not be rude. Right. But in my mind, I'm going, whatever. I mean, if that herb really worked for whatever condition they're saying, they would have told me that and taught me that in school. And since they didn't teach me that, it can't be true. Yeah. That's the mindset. That's where I was, and that's where most doctors are at. So we're totally naive to the fact that medical school taught us one way and one way only, which is pharmaceutical. Now, I'm not anti that when it's an emergency, urgent situation. If I have someone walk in my clinic today with blood pressure of 220 over 120, stroke level, I'm probably going to write them a pharmaceutical prescription to get that down right now. And I may give them an IV of magnesium because that helps get it down too. That's an alternative kind of rescue treatment. But that's rescue treatment. That's the urgent, emergent care kind of stuff. Now, you got to come back. After you go to the pharmacy and get that and get your blood pressure down, come back tomorrow and let's talk about why your blood pressure is high and get to the root cause of it, fix it, and then get rid of your pharmaceutical. But doctors aren't taught all that because root cause medicine is related to food, and doctors aren't given food education in school. 80% of medical schools have 0 hours of nutrition education for their students, medical students. I got 2 hours in 4 years of medical school on nutrition, and half that time was just on vitamins and supplements you could overdose on, so be careful, don't do that. Just giving the audience a little picture of medical school is so narrow in our education, and it's pharmaceutical based only, and we can go into how and why that came about 120 years ago. But so back to my story, I'm in post, living my dream, doing my thing, me and Jamie having kids. We have 4 kids by then, and we're 7 years into it. And the one kind of problem was that patients weren't getting any better. And that's a pretty big problem because that's the main point of doctrine, is getting people better.
Right.
But I didn't really totally see this because better, like say you have high blood pressure, you're going to come in, I'm going to give you a prescription and it'll work. It'll get your number down. But you got to stay on that medicine. You never get off of it. And over time, always I saw this, over 1 to 2 years time, that dose quit working. The blood pressure would break through and go higher. So I would increase the dose and increase the dose. And if I maxed out the dose of that blood pressure pill, I would add a second blood pressure pill to it. And so over those 7 years, I was just adding more dose, a stronger strength of medication, and double, tripling medications for diabetes, for acid reflux, for hypertension, for fibromyalgia, for depression, just hopping around to different drugs and higher doses, and just never taking anyone off medicine. And then seeing these kids at younger and younger ages getting diagnosed with adult diseases like type 2 diabetes, in a 7-year-old boy in Garza County I diagnosed. And so there's some underlying frustration there. But I didn't know you could get to the root cause. I was doing what I was trained to do. And then I met a doctor. A divine appointment happened where this doctor from Amarillo, which is north of Lubbock, about 90 miles, met him, and he said, Ben, there's no such thing as diseases. They're all consequences.
That is so truthful. That is powerful.
So in my spirit, man, I'm like, just like you thought just then, oh yeah, that's right. And so part of me thought, oh man, that can make sense, or something in that sort of resonated with me. But then my intellectual, MD, trained up, super smart, arrogant doctor part of me kicked in and said, what are you talking about? You're a fool. I didn't call him a fool, but that's what I'm thinking. And then I grabbed my list from the day, which I have, my nurse would print out my schedule for the day down in Garza County, put it on the counter. And so I just grabbed that list because I was on the phone. I'm looking around at that list. I go, Roby, I saw 40 people today and they all had diseases. And let me tell you about them. And I went down that list: rheumatoid arthritis, ulcerative colitis, ADD, depression, fibromyalgia, hypertension, diabetes, acid reflux, arthritis, and just went all the way down it. And he said, no, those are all consequences. Why don't you take that list home, Ben, that you just read off to me, and type it, every one of those diagnoses, into Google, but type it with the word inflammation. And he said, you'll see 1 million hits on every one of those. Inflammation and ADD, inflammation and depression, inflammation and rheumatoid arthritis, inflammation and cancer, inflammation and heart attacks, and just all of it. And I did, and he was right. You will see all this research about inflammation being linked to all these diseases. And then as I dug deeper to find out, mostly these are all new modern diseases over the past 100 years. They used to not exist, or they were extremely infrequent. Like cancer, lung cancer was so rare in the early 1900s, they published every single case in the medical journal. The number one killer in America today, heart attacks. 700,000 roughly will die. Americans will die this year and last year and next year. It's been the number one killer for a long time. But it wasn't even in existence. In 1912 was the first heart attack ever recorded in the medical literature. Right. And that wasn't because we weren't living long enough to get the heart attacks. We were living to 70 and 80. And when you type in life expectancy in 1900, it might say 40 or 50 years. Well, that's a little deceptive, because the infant mortality rate was 50% in 1900. So half the babies didn't make it to the 5-year-old birthday. So you average 80-year-old and 3-year-old, and you're going to get 40 years old. So that's deceptive. But heart attacks in 50, 60, 70, and 80-year-olds didn't exist at all. The founder of Hopkins Medical School, Sir William Osler, considered the founder of modern medicine in America, he was interviewed, and they said, how many heart attacks did you see in your career? 0. And that was late 1800s, early 1900s. So anyways, I started to discover autism's brand new. 1934 was the first diagnosis. Now it's 1 in 36. It was 1 in 1500 when I graduated medical school. It was 1 in 10,000 when I was born in the early 70s. And across the board, all of them, this just skyrocketing of diseases. And so Roby Mitchell was the doctor in Amarillo, and he just kept talking to me about stuff. I had a hard time believing it. He was trying to educate me. I was a little resistant, but part of me kept going back for more, mostly to try to prove him wrong. For about a year, we went back and forth on the phone, and I was busy. I mean, we're raising babies. I got 40 patients a day. I'm so busy. And I'm like, Roby, can't you just send me one book that kind of summarizes all this alternative medicine? And he said, alternative? What do you mean alternative? And I said, well, it's this different kind of hocus pocus quackery holistic stuff you're doing. And he said, all right, big shot. Next time your car's making a weird noise, are you going to take it to the mechanic or the alternative mechanic to take a look at it and fix it? Next time you're getting on an airplane to go to a medical convention, you're going to go with the aviation guys or the alternative aviation guys? Next time you need to build an addition to your clinic because you're growing so big, you're going to call the engineer to design it or the alternative engineer. And he said, Ben, every mechanic has to follow the same law of internal combustion engines. Every airline pilot follows the same laws of thrust and lift and aerodynamics. He said, God created this physical realm, put laws into it. Everyone has to operate by them. It's the same inside your body. The body's designed. There's certain inputs it needs. There's certain things it doesn't need. Just like with a amazingly designed automobile. You buy a $100,000 Cadillac Escalade, and if that owner's manual says put premium octane gas in it and put the premium synthetic motor oil in it and do it every this many miles and keep the airs in the tire and the spark plugs this way and air filter changed every however many months, you're going to do it. And if you do that, you expect your Escalade to purr like a kitten every time you turn the key and not be in the mechanic shop all the time. That's what Roby was saying and teaching, and it made common sense. It made spiritual truth sense to me. But that intellectual part just kept kicking in. I just couldn't believe it. Cognitive dissonance, really, when you're trying to come up against a notion or a thought that's just totally opposite of what you believe and what you were trained to believe. And I just couldn't overcome that hardly. But I kept coming back for more. And finally, he said, I'm tired of talking to you about this. Send me your 10 sickest patients. I'll see them for free, and you'll see for yourself. And I did. I had some really sick patients. They'd been to all the specialists in Lubbock and Dallas. They were still super sick. No one could help them. Horrible lupus patient, a horrible fibromyalgia, really bad chronic urticaria, which is hives, rash that this lady would claw her skin at night in her sleep. She itched so bad. A really, really bad diabetic, 74-year-old man that's over 300 pounds, and his pills weren't working for his sugar anymore. He needed insulin, and he refused. He said, I'm not giving myself a shot, doc. I will just die. And he was ready to. He's sitting in his recliner doing nothing all day but sitting there dying. And I said, well, there's one other option, I guess, if you're just not going to take the insulin. There's this doctor in Amarillo. He says there's no such thing as diabetes, the disease. It's a consequence. If you want to go see him. And, of course, that old man jumped up and said, heck yeah, I will, because, he's desperate. He'd do anything. Well, all these guys, these 10 sick patients, all came back better. And not just better, a little better, like better, all the way better, off their meds. Like that guy, diabetic guy, his blood sugar been averaging in the 300s, and he was on 9 medications, 3 diabetes pills, a couple blood pressure pills, cholesterol pill, arthritis pill, acid reflux pill. He came back, normal blood sugar, off all his meds, except for half of a blood pressure pill. And it blew me away. I'm like, what in the world? This 74-year-old man that I'd taken care of for 7 years, and I'd put him on most of those medications, he had his life back in a matter of months. It's unbelievable. And that patient came back to me with a tear in his eye and said, Doc, thank you so much for sending me to Roby. I've got my life back. I'm out in the garden. I'm playing with my grandkids. I'm not just sitting in the recliner waiting to die. It was amazing. And so, like I told you earlier, the reason I went to med school was to help people. And I think most doctors go for that reason.
Sure. Yeah.
And these people were being helped big time, and they were the sickest of the sick. And so that was it for me. Once I saw that, I'm like, I'm all in, even though how could this be? And what are my colleagues going to think? And how am I going to do this? And because it takes 1 to 2 hours to do this kind of visit to get to the root cause and to teach on diet and lifestyle. So I went to the hospital board who owned the clinic. I said, guys, I know we've been rocking and rolling for 7 years. You're out of debt. You got $1 million in your bank account. You got a brand new clinic totally paid for. We're on the front page of the Washington Post. But I've learned something. I've learned you can help patients get to the root of things and reverse disease. And this takes 1 to 2 hours to do instead of 7-minute visits. And I told them, obviously, we're going to lose money on this deal if enough patients want to do this. And I said, look, I'm not going to push it on people. I'm not going to advertise it even. I'll basically keep my mouth shut. But if a patient gets word of this and they ask me in that 7-minute visit and they tell me they want to get to the root, I'm going to send them back to the front desk, tell them to make a follow-up appointment for 1 hour, and I'll see them, next time we'll get to the root of it. So I told the board, look, if enough people start asking for 1 hour visits, y'all know and I know 8 people a day ain't going to cut it. We're going to lose money, and we need to make a plan to figure this out. So I went to scheming like we do, trying to do it our way. And there was another doctor who wanted to leave his small town because they were burning them out. And I said, look, you come here, just do the clinic, run them through like cattle, and I'll do the nursing home. I'll do the juvie and the jail and the Friday night football game and the house calls, and then I'll do my nutritional stuff, root cause stuff. And he said, great, sounds good, I'm coming. Well, kind of unbeknownst to me, the board decided they couldn't afford 2 doctor salaries on staff. So on a Friday afternoon, they asked me to leave and be out on Monday morning. And I called Jamie, told her to get the truck, meet me at the clinic. We cleared it out. And Monday morning, I went to Lubbock and bought a used office desk and 2 chairs and a laptop. I was all in for about $500. Went to the little Farm Bureau insurance lady who was my patient in Post. She had an extra office room in her office downtown Post, Texas. And didn't even have a window in that little room. old building downtown on the square. And Jamie, of course, she's Miss Decorator, and she put a curtain rod up with beautiful curtains, put a mirror right in the middle so it looked like a window in that little room. And I got a little square thing for my phone to swipe a credit card. And I was laying there in bed one night saying, Jamie, this is just the truth. We got to name our clinic, and this is truth. So let's look up the word truth in Latin and Greek. And so Latin for truth is Veritas. And so I looked up veritasmedical.com on the internet. Nobody had that name on a website. So I grabbed that, and then we started Veritas.
Wow.
And just started seeing people, and word of mouth spread and grew and grew and grew, and eventually moved out of Post to Lubbock, and then had offices in Midland, Abilene, San Angelo, and had 9 nurse practitioners at the time. In the past, and now we're kind of flipping it to more wellness, education, try to keep you out of my office, the doctor's office, the nurse practice office. That's not the answer. Doctors and nurse practice can only treat symptoms. It's diet and lifestyle, including your thinking, that really allows the mitochondria, which is where that inflammation is coming from, your carburetor, to get out of whack. And the only way to tune up your mitochondria is to get to the food, the drink, the movement, the peace as opposed to stress, and then the body will function. If you give it what it needs, avoid what it doesn't. These inflammatory diseases get better or go away.
That's amazing. Now, did you have to go back to additional schooling, or how did you transition there? Did you just study and?
Yeah, it was like going back to medical school all over again. I was up till 3 a.m, seemed like every night, just reading, and watching YouTubes and going to conferences. And luckily, that Dr. Roby Mitchell, he had spent a lot of time at kind of the gurus of natural medicine that been doing it for 30 and 40 years. And he'd spent time at all their clinics. So he kind of had sort of filtered it, narrowed it down as some basic stuff. So that was really helpful, just learning from Roby.
Right.
But of course, you feel like you got to go learn it all, because if you're charging people cash money to see them, and you got to feel like you know what you're talking about. So there's a big learning curve, huge learning curve.
I bet.
But at the same time, so much can get done by just telling the patient, hey, for right now, while I'm still learning and reading on your disease, why don't you just cut out processed sugar for a minute? Why don't you make it a plan to get at least 30 minutes of sunshine today? Get out of your chair every hour, set your alarm, just walk around the office for every hour for a minute. Just these basic stuff.
Yeah.
And one of the things I did tell them early on was, cut out the grain, wheat, corn, and rice. Cut it out. Because that gets processed by the body right into sugar, raises your blood sugar, and that drives inflammation. So it would be basically cut the grain, cut the sugar. That was 12 years ago.
Yeah. Yeah.
And we do see inflammation come down, weight goes down, inflammatory-based symptoms, which are everything from migraines to blood pressure to blood sugar, you name it, can get better. And that's what we saw with basic stuff as I was learning. And so I learned a lot about alternative medicine, ozone, ultraviolet blood irradiation, lots of supplements, lots of protocols, and that's all great. But now what I've come to believe is even those are kind of a green version of pharmaceutical-based treat a symptom type medicine that I learned in school. We can just use herbs and ozone and all these cool gadgets and treatment things, and I'm not against them. I mean, we have them in our clinic. We use them. But I tell every patient that wants to sign up for one of these IVs or supplements or something, listen, this is a temporary Band-Aid. It's a natural version, so maybe the side effects aren't there, but your insurance ain't going to cover it. The copay ain't going to cover it. You got to pay cash for these extras, and it'll drop inflammation. You'll feel better most likely, but you can't just keep doing these IVs the rest of your life. You got to get to the diet and the lifestyle. And I'm so convinced of that now that we've really flipped this thing where we just preach and teach and teach and teach, and with the goal of no one needing to come into the medical side of our business.
Which is so contrary to conventional medicine. I mean, that's not the goal of a doctor, is to keep you out of his office. So,
right. And, I want to speak to that a little, because confidence in doctors has dropped from 70% to 40%. Trust in doctors. That's from pre-pandemic to post-pandemic. People are fed up. That thing just exposed so much. People are curious. They're looking, they're researching, they're studying, and they've completely lost so much faith and trust in doctors. And I don't want to defend the doctor except to say they're so ignorant to the truth because they weren't taught it. So you can't give from what you don't have. These doctors don't have it. And there's so much arrogance of thinking they were so smart in high school and college, top of their class, got into med school, spent all that time, all that money, all that debt, and the culture puts them up on this pedestal, priest in a white coat. I mean, they're up against a lot to have to try to see that truth, assuming like I did that, hey, I went to Harvard and Stanford and wherever, and I'm the smartest and I learned it all. It's such a horrible setup. And then you hook them on the money side, and even if a doctor starts to see the truth, his paycheck is most doctors are associated with hospital systems now. So if you don't get in line and do what your administrators say to do and follow the rules and the protocols, it's your paycheck on the line, much less your reputation. What do people say in the doctor's lounge and at the country club? I mean, it's a huge thing. So I'm again not defending the doctor. They still need to do what's right. And that was horrible what happened during COVID, not treating patients. It was awful. Outpatient treatment absolutely worked. And I don't want to go off on the whole COVID thing, but it's just a bad situation. So the patients are the ones suffering. Doctors are suffering too. Actually, a lot call me and they're suffering. They want to get out and don't know how.
Right.
So it's just an awful situation, but I'm all about teaching the people so they can steward their health and be set free and be disease free and go live their life and be who God made them to be and not need that failing sick care system.
Yes. And if you're like me, it's a constant learning. I mean, you get something and you go, well, I'm going to study that. I'm going to figure this out. What is the root cause? Where is this coming from? Mm-hmm. I see it all the time. And I love you talk about managing health, sickness versus fixing.
Yeah.
And I just think that's a powerful analogy.
Yeah, I did not get that at all. I did not understand that. I had a sweet, sweet little old lady. And I know I have to be careful with that word old. She was, she was probably late 70s, which isn't that old. But it was a Friday afternoon. This is down in Post before I knew the truth. And she came in with chest pain. And I was a little, upset by that because I'd had a long week. It's the end of the day. She doesn't have an appointment. It's Friday afternoon. I'm trying to get out of the office to the football game. And little old ladies walking in on a Friday afternoon unannounced with chest pain is usually a heart attack. Yeah. So anyways, I start talking to her about it. Hey, is this pain in the center of your chest or the left side of your chest? Is it like a heaviness, like an elephant sitting on your chest and it radiates to your left arm, up your jaw? Gets worse when you exert yourself, like walking, carrying in your groceries. Or is it more in the center of the chest, like a burning sensation that radiates up to your throat and your mouth, and it's worse when you lay down, and it's better if you take a Tums or drink some milk? And she said that one, the second one. So that was just, a matter of a few seconds with a few targeted questions. You already have it way narrowed down to, this chest pain is probably actually GERD, reflux.
Yes.
We still did an EKG on her just to be sure. And, but real quickly, like within minutes, we matched her, which that's what medical school teaches doctors to do. It's a matching game. A patient walks in with a complaint, a symptom. We match that symptom to the label. So if you walk in with a headache, there's only about 4 different matches you can make. Migraine headache, tension headache, cluster headache, sinus headache, basically are the 4 main headache types. So you ask her questions because each one has different characteristics, and the patient tells you those characteristics. It's a stabbing ice pick in one eye, and bright lights make it worse, and I get nauseated. If I get in a dark room, it feels better. Okay, migraine. Done. Yeah. That's how you can do these 7-minute visits. It's a matching game. You match symptoms to the label, and then you're done. The visit's over because every label, migraine or acid reflux, has a pharmaceutical to treat that symptom. So with the little old lady, okay, this is reflux. I wrote a prescription for Nexium, 40 milligrams, number 36 refills, ripped that prescription off the pad and handed it to her and tried to hand it to her, and she wouldn't take it. And she said, Doc, I'm not taking that. You're just treating my symptoms.
Wow.
And again, this was before I knew the truth. And when she said that, it hit me like totally out of left field. Like, I don't know what you're talking about. And I really didn't. I'm like, what do you mean symptoms? No, I'm not just treating a symptom. This is a disease, GERD. The D is for disease, gastroesophageal reflux disease, GERD. So I'm treating the disease. And this is a treatment for it, Nexium. That's just the way it is. You're making too much stomach acid. It's going up your esophagus and it's hurting you. And here you go. What's the deal? And she just kept saying, no, you're treating my symptom. And it was totally going over my head. Didn't know what she was talking about. And so I tried to kind of scare her into it. I said, listen, if this acid that's going up in your esophagus causing pain, if it continues to do that for months and months and months, you can be at risk for esophageal cancer and that's true. You can be prone to cancer in your esophagus if it gets irritated by acid for a long time. But she didn't buy the fear tactic, didn't go with that. So then I went biblical on her, said, look, Adam and Eve in the garden, they sinned, so death and disease came into the world. Lucky for you, doctors with brains, God made us with intelligence to figure out these medicines to help you not suffer. So you should take this and not suffer. And she didn't buy that either. And she just kept saying symptoms. I'm like, I don't know what you're talking about. And I finally was just fed up. I'm like, I gotta get out of here. It's Friday afternoon. It's been a long day. And I said, ma'am, I'm sorry, but I don't really understand what you're saying. And I can't force you to go to the pharmacy and get this prescription filled and take it. But there's only 2 options. Option 1, take the medicine and you won't hurt and you'll probably not get esophageal cancer. Option 2, don't take the medicine and suffer and hurt and maybe get cancer. That's it. There's your option. I put the prescription in her purse and I walked out. And what she was, so at that time I was clueless that there's an option 3. But right. That's what she was getting at. That's what she was asking for. Doc, I haven't had this feeling my whole life, and now I do. Something's causing it. That's what she wanted me to address. I didn't get it. I didn't know how to address it. What I told her that it's too much stomach acid was a total lie. That was from the commercials.
Yeah.
Because the little flap in between her esophagus, the food pipe, and the stomach, that little flap should be tightly squeezed shut all the time, except when you swallow and it lets the food pass. because normal pH in the stomach is super, super acidic in the 1 to 2 range. That's battery acid range, but you have a nice layer of mucus in the stomach to protect your stomach from getting a hole burned through it like battery acid would. But that's normal, and that normal, very, very acidic environment is what triggers that valve to squeeze shut.
That is so powerful.
So her actual problem was not enough stomach acid.
Oh, yeah.
But anyways, back to what you originally said, management versus fix it. That's the example. We were going to manage her problem because that's what school taught me to do. Manage asthma, manage hypertension, manage diabetes. The American Diabetes Association website even says it. Type 2 diabetes is a chronic progressive disease, meaning you'll have it forever. It's going to progressively get worse. And then it goes on to say you might be able to manage it with diet and exercise at first, but then you'll need medicine, and eventually you'll need to manage it with insulin. Yeah. That is what is on their website. And that is not true. That's true if you're an American doctor and a standard American patient. That is true. But standard American doctors and standard American patients get the worst health outcomes of anyone in the world. We die the youngest. We have the most diseases of anybody. We take the most drugs of anybody. We spend more money than anybody by far, 2 times more than anybody, more infant mortality than anybody. More of our babies die. More of our mamas die in childbirth, highest maternal mortality rate. We have the highest chronic disease rate of kids. Why is this? Because we're managing, not fixing it, and we're feeding all these people, Americans, processed food.
Yes. Yeah.
That's it. It's that simple. Doctors are taught to manage a diseased body that's diseased because of the horrible input that we're giving it, mostly through food, but other inputs too. And so doctors that only know management. Management doesn't work long term. Management causes more suffering and death, early death, than fixing it, obviously. So they just don't know how to fix it.
Yeah. You often teach that if you aren't born with it, you can fix it.
Exactly.
Yeah, because I hear people say things all the time like heart disease or high cholesterol runs in my family. Celiac runs in my, or this runs in my family. And I'm just like, does it run in your family? Because we're eating this, we're not giving our bodies what they need. And it's really, really sad. And you talk about some basic foundational principles. You touched on them a little bit that you apply in your practice. Tell us about that. I think you call them the 4 pillars of teaching. And I just think that's so powerful.
Yep. Nutrition, hydration, movement, and peace. These are the foundational principles. Like I said, with the Cadillac, the Escalade, you got to give it what it needs. God designed us to eat real food. I call it God food, not man food. God's designed in his version of food, not man's altered version of God's food, which is what Americans eat. So we need God food, not man food. We need good, clean hydration, not liquid sugar, high fructose corn syrup hydration. So water, tea, coffee, basically. We need to move. We're not designed to sit in a 90-degree position, like in a chair all day. And most people get up, they maybe eat breakfast or drink their coffee, then they sit in their car driving to work, then they sit in their office chair all day, then they get home and sit on the couch all day. And this seated position is the new smoking. Tons of studies that talk about how just sitting all day increases your risk for every single disease out there, big time, more than smoking in some cases. And then most important is peace. The body's not designed, that mitochondria, your carburetor, you can give it the most high octane gas, the perfect, oxygenation, good exercise, good minerals, spark plug, all that. But if you don't shift gears, if you run that Escalade in first gear and you're going 50 miles an hour, you're going to redline your RPMs. It's going to be revved up so high, despite your perfect food, fuel, oxygen, and all that. You cannot redline this mitochondria, and that's what fight or flight mode does versus rest and digest, peace. That is so important. In fact, Roby Mitchell that I talked about that got me into all this, he passed away early. He was in his early 60s, and he was fit. That was his nickname on the Facebook and stuff, social media, Dr. Fit, F-I-T-T. And you can see pictures of him to this day on the internet. This dude, ripped. He had huge biceps, huge pecs. He was a workout fiend. He'd do one arm pull-ups, one arm push-ups, put a 100-pound backpack on his back, run around the medical center in 100-degree heat and fatigues because he's an ex-Marine. He was the MD, PhD. He's super smart. There's no food or drink that went in his mouth that wasn't a superfood, super drink. He didn't just drink green tea. He would doctor it up with cardamom and nutmeg and turmeric and all these spices, and he would teach me why he put all those spices in. He loved Thai food. He said, Ben, I love Thai food because all this spice they put in, and here's what this spice does, and here's what this spice does medicinally. So I'm just saying, you cannot eat, drink, and move, exercise better than Rogan Mitchell.
Right.
And prostate cancer hit him, and I saw him overcome it with natural therapies. It was shocking to me, but I saw the biopsy report, the Gleason score, the PSA, and the PET scan, and then I saw it all go to normal. It was amazing. But then it came back, and he couldn't overcome it with all these amazing natural things. And at the very end of it, he knew and I knew there were some unresolved matters in his heart that he just couldn't get to. And at the very end, he told me on his deathbed, he had set up this conference in Amarillo for doctors around the country were flying in to speak at the conference, and Roby was going to be the keynote. And of course, he couldn't do it. I mean, he had metastatic lesions all over his bones, so he's in horrible pain, on morphine, bedbound. He said, Ben, I want you to go speak in my place, but speak on the spiritual roots of disease.
Yes.
And so I did. And I'm not the guru of that, but I'm just telling your audience, don't just focus on diet, exercise, hydration, and supplements and being this perfect, quote unquote, health nut kind of person as that is your idol, your savior, your hope is in that. No, all that is just stewardship. We need to steward the temple.
Yes.
The Holy Spirit lives in us, and that stewardship's important. But it's not the primary. It's seek the kingdom first. The kingdom is not about food and drink. Actually, it's about righteousness, peace, and joy. And exercise profiteth a little bit. I believe we need to do these things, but they're secondary to our heart beliefs. And our heart beliefs need to line up with the truth. And that truth will allow you to walk in peace, bathe your mitochondria in peace, despite your circumstances, all the days of your life. I believe it can be done, and you will be healthier when you do that.
Yes, diet, like you said, is so important. But I always say, as surely as we're physical beings, we are spiritual.
Amen.
God's breath of life, His Spirit in us, and we have to take care of that spiritual man. And the Scriptures tell us, with above all else, guard your heart because of the issues of life. And you're so right. Diet is important, but it's not the end all and the cure all. And I just love that.
Real quick, Sue, on the gene thing you mentioned earlier, a thought rooted in bitterness, unforgiveness, anger, those thoughts actually change the shape of your DNA where your genes are housed.
Yeah.
And it changes which genes are turned on and turned off. So that's the little piece on the family. It runs in my family, my genes. You can have the gene for breast cancer, Alzheimer's, and heart attack. Keep the gene turned off. It's clear. We are in charge of which genes get turned on and off through both diet and toxin exposure, lack of exercise, all that. But stress and our thoughts of our heart, our beliefs, actually turn genes on and off.
Yes, that was so powerful. I just listened to you teach on that, and that was, I never thought about it that way. And I encourage everyone. I have a cancer testimony of my own, and my podcast is titled "Not by Bread Alone." I don't remember the episode number, but you can check that out. And it's about bitterness and unforgiveness. It's there. So anyway, I was trying to remember how long ago we met and when you first reached out to me to be on your radio program. And I found the original email that you sent, and it was back in April of 2021. And you mentioned that a client had told you about me and what I teach. And you touched on it a little bit, that 12 years ago, you were pulling people off of grain and wheat, and which I understand, the store-bought stuff, you got to get them off of it. And because that is inflammatory and so bad for you. But from that moment on that radio show, and I don't remember if you mentioned it to me afterwards, but you said to me, "You've just changed my whole thinking here."
Yes.
I'll never forget that. And I'm like, I changed your thinking. But ever since that moment, Lubbock and Veritas and much of Texas has exploded and has jumped on the bread train. And it was a bit of a change for you, I think, but it seems you fully embrace it. And you've mentioned that you're the bread maker in your family, and I just love that.
Yeah.
Has your family seen health benefits from incorporating the bread? Because you were probably eating pretty clean.
We were eating clean, but yes, it's kind of like, it seemed like every other family wart story. So Poppy May, our littlest, who's now 7, so I guess 3 years ago she would have been 4, had this kind of persistent wart on a finger, went right away, just boom, right away. And we hear that so much. I know you have tons of testimonies on that.
Yeah.
And really, so we have a pretty healthy family, so that one for sure. But otherwise, what we saw was just more fulfillment of being filled. Like these kids, kids can just eat and eat and eat. And all of a sudden you feed them a piece of bread or pizza in particular, that pizza dough. Yeah. They're filled up. They're satisfied. They're not running back to the kitchen every 30 minutes for a snack. Yeah. So that was one of the biggest things we saw. And of course, regularity of the bowels and just health and vibrancy in general. So
energy.
Yeah. But in my patients, for sure, so many things, and all the time hearing, "Oh, yeah, I was gluten sensitive," or "I've been gluten free for 20 years, and I ate this, and I'm fine." That's like a weekly that I hear that, or their bowels regulate. Just basic. So it got me. It was so eye opening. And part of that, too, I think a big part of it was the connection to the Bible and this truth that you brought spiritually. Yeah. That resonated so much. And just knowing there's so many other cofactors in food that we haven't even discovered or identified. I mean, they're estimating, I think we've named like 150 things, and they think there's 80,000 things in food in general, not just bread. So just that trusting of God's design, He put it all in there. Yeah. Man strips it out. So it just goes right along so much with what we believe and what we teach and preach of give the body what it needs. And once you brought the truth on, look, here's all that's in there. And here's why when you strip it out, it drives inflammation. It was a no-brainer. Yeah. So, it was a huge shift because that's in the middle of low-carb keto craze that everybody was in. Yeah,
and the anti-gluten, the gluten was causing all the problems.
Yep. So it was eye-opening to me, but obviously the Holy Spirit leading it, and just boom, that truth hit my heart, just like when Roby started first talking to me. And I just knew it was right. I knew we weren't, when we just pull people off stuff and restrict stuff, that can't be the way.
I know. You know what? Hearing from people too, and you probably as well, when we start restricting the diet of God's foods that He's given us to nourish us and support our health and our body, it's a slippery slope. And I've seen, and I've had people share with me, is the next thing they know, they have to be even more restrictive. They can't eat this. They can't eat that. They can't tolerate this. I had a lady a few months ago share that she was down to 7 foods. And she bread, and she was like, it has healed my gut. It's nourishing my body. And I hear that with people that go gluten-free. The next thing, they can't tolerate dairy. They can't tolerate eggs. And now and so that's what I tell people. I said, this bread, the people that think they have to go gluten-free, most are telling me it's not just that they can tolerate this, they are finding health and healing from this bread. And that's exciting. So
Yeah. And my theory on that is the microbiome, all the bacteria in the gut, they live obviously off this food that we're putting in. Yes. And you remove something like, say, gluten, and you remove dairy, and you remove you're affecting the microbiome to the point, because there's 94 different strains of bacteria in the gut that I know can break down gluten real good. Right. And I think across the board it's that way. So then we start restricting. It shifts our population of gut bugs narrower and narrower and narrower. And now our bugs aren't there to be able to process that food. So it's really, we got to fertilize and nourish these bugs. They'll thrive again, these good bacteria in the gut, and proper digestion will occur.
Yeah, and I've done some studies on the microbiome, and one study I read says that the gluten-free diet that so many have gone on, they're actually finding that it elevates the pathogenic organism and strains of those good organisms. And that's interesting that you brought that up, because I'm thinking, so if we're not putting gluten in there, that's what those organisms those strains live on, if they're breaking it down, that's their food. They're living.
Yeah.
So if you hold that, then you're going to lose those organisms. They're not going to be thriving. The others are going to take over. Is my simple explanation of that. So
yeah, I agree. And those bugs make so many vitamins and or not minerals, but vitamins B and C and all these K. And it's this backup system, this pharmacy in our gut. So
I know.
It's amazing.
Yes, it is. So anyway, it has just been so good. Now, I have a note here to ask you about this, and I may have to get Jamie on to tell me. Your wife, Jamie, told me about a duck story. The duck story well enough to tell me about it. I think it's so great.
Oh, I probably know it enough. So we bought some ducks because we have a pond, and we've had ducks before, but things happen, coyotes and whatnot. And so we didn't have ducks, and springtime and ducks at Tractor Supply. And so the kids bought some ducks, and they each bought one. So there was one for each kid. One of our oldest doesn't live at home anymore. So we had these 5 ducks, and they're little ducklings, and they're growing up. Well, this one duckling, his neck starts getting just real floppy to the point he can't even hold his head up. And it's all twisted and like flopped over backwards. And I mean, this thing is weird looking, and he can't eat and drink. And one of my kids looks it up on the internet, and it has a name for this duck disease. I forget what it is, but it's a known thing. And there's a selenium that it said if you use selenium and maybe some other minerals, it may help. And anyways, we had the idea. So I don't know who had the idea. We're going to give these ducks some fresh milled grain. And so they got to grinding in the grinder and feeding that little baby every day, fresh milled grain. And lo and behold, I mean, it took a number of, I think, weeks even. His neck got stronger and stronger and stronger. I mean, I was ready to put this duckling down. He was suffering. Yeah. It was awful. And now, of course, they're all grown up and fine. This is last spring to this spring, so they're about a year old. Or no, it was this year. Anyways, he's grown up. He's totally normal. You can't even tell which duck that was whose neck was like that. It was incredible. So, yeah, if you don't know what's going on, just get some fresh milled grain in there and mainline that stuff.
Yeah. Well, that's as you're sharing this, I didn't think about it when Jamie told me that night when I was speaking in Lubbock. She shared that with me. But I noticed that my 2 children, conceived and born after we started milling and making our bread, they had strong muscles. They did not have wobbly necks. And I've heard that from others that I've shared that with. And I remember years ago when I studied Adele Davis, her mentioning vitamin E strengthens your muscles, and that American babies are born with these floppy necks, and that shouldn't be that way, that they weren't before. And I saw it. I mean, I saw my little 1-hour newborn lift her head up and look me in the eye, and it was very noticeably different. And so that's I just thought about that when you shared the duck story. So anyway, but it's just been such a pleasure speaking with you. Thank you so much. And would you like to share final words of encouragement that you'd like to leave our listeners with today? I just love your faith in Christ, and you believe that we have a loving Creator that designed our bodies to heal.
Yes, ma'am. Well, thank you, Sue. I love being on your show. Love you and what you're doing, your whole team. It was a blessing to be in Oxford with you a few weeks ago. And so just a kindred spirit, like I said, and just keep up the good work. You've been a blessing to Lubbock and all of Texas, all these co-ops popping up everywhere. So thanks to your husband, your whole family. Give them our love and appreciation. And for the audience, I just want to encourage them. I know it's been kind of a tough few years, and like I said, people not trusting doctors and hospitals and all that. I just want to encourage you that don't put your hope, trust, and faith in any man or woman in any system of the world. We're all potentially could be corruptible in these systems for sure. Money and greed and the love of money and all that. Seek the kingdom first. Seek the truth. The spirit of truth can comfort you in every situation. In the days ahead, who knows what it's going to look like, but I know one thing. The King of Kings, name above all names, he's overcome it all. We have to believe it. We can't let our carnal 5 senses tell us what to believe. We got to let the Word of God and Jesus' life tell us what to believe. Yeah. We have to take authority in our lives over these situations, but mainly it's in our heart, in our thinking. When we think a certain way, it changes our physical. So that fear And that deprivation and lack, that's what cutting out wheat and reducing your diet down to nothing. It's a deprivation mindset. It's a fear-based mindset. So addressing fear, not letting fear drive any decision is my number one encouragement to everybody. Your body is designed to heal, is designed to function. Trust it. Seek the kingdom first. Get in that word, that truth will set you free.
Yes. And I'm sure you hear this as much as I do. And it's very humbling, and it's a real blessing when people say, I was praying for an answer and I found your teaching, or I found and it's so powerful. And I know a verse that the Lord gave me some years ago when I went, why didn't you tell me this before? He said to me, you never asked. And Isaiah 65 says, all day long, I stand here with my arms stretched out saying, here I am, to a people that seek me not. And it's so easy to not seek him here in America for our illness, but he has the answer, and he promises to give us wisdom if we just ask. And I want to thank you for taking the time out of your busy day. I know you've got things to do and people to see, and I just thank you for all you're doing to help people find true health. So where can people find your teaching?
Probably best place is our website, veritaswellnessmember.com.
Okay.
And then, because then there's links to our social media on there. We've got an introductory series of videos about the 4 pillars on there. Instagram, I think we're on there. I don't do social media, but my team does. I think they changed it to Dr. Ben Edwards is the name of that page now. So I'm probably Instagram. I think we're on Facebook too, possibly. And YouTube, we're on there too. Dr. Ben Edwards, I believe. But the website's probably where you can find it all.
Right. And You're the Cure. If you just Google You're the Cure, you can find that podcast. Yeah.
Yep.
All right. Thank you. Thank you. You have a wonderful, blessed day. And just thank you to everyone listening today. I encourage you to check out You're the Cure podcast with Dr. Ben Edwards and his resources. And I know that you're as encouraged as I am to stay the course and trust in God and the incredible healing power he has created in each of our bodies. We are indeed fearfully and wonderfully made. Until next time, this is Sue Becker from Bread Beckers with Sue's Healthy Minutes.
Sue's Healthy Minutes podcast has been a presentation by the Bread Beckers Incorporated, located in Woodstock, Georgia. For more information, store hours, and learning opportunities, visit breadbeckers.com and follow us on Facebook and Instagram. Make sure to subscribe to this podcast and never miss an episode. Share this with 2 friends who would benefit from this information, and be sure to join us again next week for more of Sue's Healthy Minutes.